Gospel this morning comes from Matthew 25, 1 through 13. I'm reading the Voice translation. And Jesus said, or picture the kingdom of heaven this way. It will be like 10 bridesmaids who each picked up a lantern and went out to meet a certain bridegroom. And 5 of these women were sensible, good with details, and remembered to bring small flasks of oil for their lanterns. But 5 of them were flighty, too caught up in the excitement of their jaunts, and they forgot to bring oil with them. The bridegroom did not turn up right away. Indeed, all of the women, while waiting, found themselves falling asleep. And then in the middle of the night, they heard someone call, "The bridegroom is here, finally! Wake up and greet him." And the women got up and they trimmed the wicks of their lanterns and they prepared to go greet the groom. And the 5 women who had no oil turned to their friends for help. And they said, "Please give us some of your oil. Our lanterns are flickering and they will go out soon." But the 5 women who'd come prepared with oil said that they didn't have enough. They said, "If we give you some of our oil, we'll run out too soon. You'd better go wake a dealer and buy your own supply." So the 5 ill-prepared women went in to search for oil to buy. And while they were gone, the groom arrived. And the 5 who stood ready with their lanterns accompanied him to the wedding party. And after they arrived, the door was shut. And finally, the rest of the women turned up at the party and they knocked on the door. And they said, "Master, open up and let us in." And the bridegroom, refusing, said, "I certainly don't know you. So stay awake. You neither know the day nor the hour when the Son of Man will come." Here ends the reading of the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Now, most of you have heard me talk a little bit about my childhood and my adolescence as I grew up in Kansas. And if you haven't, or if you happen to catch a nap during those parts of past sermons, I grew up in a small Kansas town, a little conservative community in southwest Kansas. And most of the churches in that area would fall under the evangelical type of church. And so it isn't really a surprise to me that one of them bought advertising by the local Target in Garden City, Kansas. Target, for what it's worth, has always been one of my go-to stores. It's been a store where I go for getting the things in life that I have deemed necessary, and it's been one of the places that I've often found myself walking around when I was bored or just trying to get my steps in if I needed them for that day. And I used to know even the best way to walk through Target so that I could walk through every aisle and check every end cap for those real good clearance deals. I could easily prepare for multiple apocalypses while perusing the wares of Target. Whether it was because I was shopping, wasting time, or just visiting the only Starbucks in my hometown, which has happened to be located in Target, suffice it to say that I spent a lot of time at Target. Since about the first time that I learned how to drive and I had gotten my license to be able to drive myself to Target. And every time I left those hallowed aisles of Target to head home, I passed this large painted sign. And it said, "Jesus is coming. Are you ready?" Now, I got to tell you, I never realized how much a part of my life those words would actually be as I got older. Not for the wrong reasons, at least I don't think. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I don't really put that much stock in all of those words on my own. But when you're a minister, or when you study theology, you spend a lot of time talking about something called eschatology. Raise your hand if you know what eschatology is. All right, cool. So eschatology is the theological aspect of the end times. Every theology has a part of the theology that is about that part of existence. When you do a constructive theology, where you're actually constructing a theology out of an idea, that's one of the things you get to do, is you get to figure out how that applies to the end times. In the disciples of Christ, we don't really focus as much on eschatology. But in certain sects of Christianity, it has a much larger grasp on the congregations. And as I alluded earlier, one of the parts of the church that places a lot of weight on the end times are those that skew towards evangelical and conservative. When I say conservative, I want you to hear conservative theologically, not conservative politically. These are the churches that do things like have book studies on the Left Behind series. They're churches that look for the signs of the end times and will pinpoint a date to tell you, you better be ready by this. One of my colleagues, Reverend Dr. Eric Smith, certainly has something to say about these churches, about these ideas and how they permeate the church. He says, one of the first things to say about the Bible is that it doesn't really contain any scenario that's like what the fictional Left Behind books or any other apocalyptic account might envision. He says these claims of dispensationalists and rapture hawkers and fiction authors are far, far, far more clear and confident than the biblical evidence that they purport themselves to rely on. The case for apocalypticism is made mostly by cherry picking. It's taking small verses and even phrases from across the Bible, from unrelated books, and then taking them out of context to make it seem like they relate to each other. Take something from Daniel, a vague, scary phrase from Revelation, maybe something that Paul wrote to the Ephesians, a group of people that he knew, and a description of some war that ended thousands of years ago, and claim it's all about the stuff that you're seeing on CNN right now, and you'll probably get some attention and maybe even some social media followers, but you won't be doing responsible biblical interpretation. And listen, I get it. There's so many things happening in our world right now and in the recent past that it's really hard to look around and not wonder if this is it. If this is the big one, this go at existence ending. It's hard to look at what's happening in our world and not be somewhat afraid. And if you're not afraid, maybe you are like me. Maybe you are just in this constant state of discomfort at what is happening. And when you're already feeling that, it's really easy to get caught up in the hullabaloo. And I think the best way to help pull you out of that, though, begins with a reminder that these scenarios that have caused so much fear in people's minds are not really biblical. They're products of a 20th century theological agenda and an attempt to sell books. A lot of what makes people afraid is part of a fictional world. These are things that you shouldn't be any more afraid of, this rapture or being left behind, than you should be afraid of Voldemort or Sauron or Thanos. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave us when we come across stories like our passage this morning that feel so apocalyptic in nature? Well, it leaves us in a familiar place. It leaves us in a place of discomfort, especially if you're the one having to preach on something like this, right? This particular parable discriminates between the wise and the foolish bridesmaids, half of whom miss out on the party on account of their unpreparedness because the door has been shut while they were seeking oil. Is that how it works? Is that how it works? That one apparently arbitrary decision marks the line between inclusion and exclusion from the ultimate party? Maybe you're like me. Maybe this gospel doesn't really feel all that gospel-like. This parable seems, quite frankly, a little unfair. All the bridesmaids brought oil. They all waited. They all fell asleep. And the decision about who gets to come in is down to who anticipated the bridegroom to be incredibly late and brought more oil. Never mind that it was the bridegroom, not the bridal party, who broke social protocol, who arrived exceptionally late for their own banquet. Sure, they cannot be shut out for being late to the banquet. It's their banquet. The bridegroom was the late one, though. But what would have happened? What would have happened, I wonder, had the bridesmaids simply continued to wait with sputtering lamps and dwindling lights? What would have happened had the bridesmaids simply waited in the darkness of the night? Or better yet, instead of trying to split oil in the lamps, what would have happened had the wise bridesmaids shared a little bit of their light? Surely two could share the light of a lamp as well as one, but they didn't. They didn't, and the foolish run to get more oil. And to me, that's where their mistake happened. They left when they should have stayed. And the bridal couple surely would have welcomed their friends into the light of the banquet, unconcerned about the state of their oil lamps, happy to just see their friends waiting for them. But that's not where the mistakes end. What are we to do with those wise ones who couldn't spare an ounce of oil, those wise ones who chose their own needs over the needs of others? What are we to do with them? Because truly, I can think of no place in the Bible, no place where we would have been afforded such selfish behavior and given such an exalted place. No, they say, we cannot share with you because we might not have enough for ourselves. We're not sure, but just to be safe, we're not sharing what we have. The wise bridesmaids didn't really hold up to their end of the bargain either. Instead of offering some generosity, whether it was of oil, of light, or of half-dark company, they held on to what was theirs at the expense of the foolish. They didn't show any solidarity with their fellow bridesmaids. So the wise and the foolish, it seems, operate on the same premise of scarcity and fear. Neither trust the love of the bridegroom. This love that the bridegroom has for their friends. Neither trust that the bridegroom will embrace all, regardless of whether they walk in the light or if they walk in the darkness. But don't worry, there's more mistakes happening. The last place I feel we see a mistake is at the hands of the bridegroom. Because when the bridesmaids come back from getting more oil, the bridegroom doesn't let them in and even says, I don't know you. Perhaps the bridegroom thought them to be derelict friends who couldn't wait up with him for just a few more hours, or maybe he thought they'd simply given up and gone home during the long delay, even though neither of those is true. The bridegroom is stingy. Stingy with their grace, stingy with their welcome. God, there's faults all around. But maybe that's the point. Maybe that is the understanding of this parable. Maybe that's the understanding of this much more encompassing story than we ever realized. Because as it turns out, we've all probably been each of these parables' characters. I know I have. I'm sure you probably have too. I have been foolish, and I've let my lamp run out. And I've been the wise who feared sharing and losing what they had. But you know what? I've also been the bridegroom, refused to let people in. And maybe in the end, that's what this parable does. Maybe that's what all good short stories do. They allow us to find ourselves. To find ourselves, warts and all. So, if you find yourself feeling like the foolish bridesmaids, remember to wait in the darkness. Don't run from it. It is a holy place. And God will meet you there. Or maybe you find yourself feeling like the wise bridesmaids. And if you do that, remember to share what you have, even if it scares you. Don't trade temporary comfort for lasting and beloved community. The chance to give of yourself. That's a holy place too. And God will meet you there. And finally, if you find yourself feeling like the bridegroom, remember to open wide the banquet doors. Share the feast. Don't let hurt feelings and fear insulate you from others. Because welcoming those who have made mistakes and those who walk in darkness and in light, you know what? That's a holy place too. And God will meet you there. Amen.